I want to show you something about this super volcano, Santorini, because I believe it's the volcano that got used for the 10 plagues of Egypt. Remember the story of Moses? The 10 plagues, water turning into blood, the firstborns, frogs, lice, grasshoppers, no, the locusts. I wanted to do this a long time ago, but I didn't think I had the authority like to use the documentary, this part only, to use for the 10 plagues. This is the video that came out to me, half edited, remember? You have to see this. NASA also says that in 2032, apparently an asteroid has a 2.3% chance of hitting Earth, a city killer. Okay, now, for this stuff, I'm going to show you something about the 7 trumpets of the book of Revelation. You know, the 7 trumpets of the apocalypse. Listen. Santorini is not the only volcano. All of them are going mental right now in the world. But please, I'm going to show you a few stuff. Please stay with me. Stay with me because I really want to show you something and then you can make up your mind. Before going there, let's have a few looks at some small videos about the tremors.
Earthquake is the strongest tremor yet during recent seismic activity in the area and was felt nearly 200 miles away in Athens. The tremors, which have also affected some of the neighbouring Greek islands, began at the end of January and have continued since then. More than 12,800 quakes have been detected by the University of Athens
12,800 quakes.
seismological laboratory. No one has been reported hurt, but more than 11,000 people on the island have left as a precaution. And the
So, listen, people don't know how big this volcano is. Look, let me show you this. Encyclopedia Britannica, okay? Look at this. The eruption of Thera. This is Santorini in Greek, Thera. Devastating Bronze Age eruption of a long dormant volcano on the Aegean island of Thera, about 70 miles, 110 kilometers north of Crete. Earthquakes, perhaps contemporaneous with the eruption, shattered Knossos and damaged other settlements in northern Crete. The Thera eruption is thought to have occurred about, look at this date, okay? 1500 BCE. Listen, this is the date that they put the story of Moses, the event of Moses. Moses parting the sea, going to that mountain with the black pig that I showed you, and the 10 plagues of Egypt, right? 10 plagues. You know, Santorini. What does the volcano has to do with the exodus of Egypt? Look at this. Although, on the basis of evidence obtained during the 1980s from Greenland, ice core, and from tree ring and radiocarbon dating, some scholars believe that it occurred earlier, possibly during the 1620s BCE. Ash and pumice from the eruption have been found as far away as Egypt. What? Stay with this, okay? Stay with this. And Israel. And there has been speculation that the eruption was source of the legend of Atlantis and of stories of the Old Testament book of Exodus. What? Listen, when I show you this, maybe you start to get it, okay? It's from this documentary that came out to me. Remember this one? The edited one, the 2-hour one, because the original is 1 hour and a half. Please, I'm going to show you the Santorini effect of the 10 plagues. Then you make up your mind. Because the Bible says that in the last days the waters again will turn to blood, and so on and so on. Actual blood? Or is it saying that in the last days volcanic activity will once again explode, make the waters as blood? You know, it talks about melting hills and this and that. What? Listen, Santorini is not the only volcano in eruption mode around the world. Look at this. Apart from Egypt and Israel, ash, pumice from the eruption found there. Look at this. Remains of the 3,500-year-old Santorini volcano eruption found in Turkey. You know, in Turkey. So, what a blast in Turkey. Now, this is a Santorini volcano. Look, See, that's the Santorini volcano. This is Egypt. You have Turkey here and Israel here. You have ash that went in those directions. But in Egypt, please. Wow. Now, before going there, remember this. Okay, this asteroid. Because in many parts of the Bible, let me check. Yes. See, say for example this, okay? The first angel sounded the trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood. Listen, this is one thing that rained down in the plagues of Egypt. And we are talking about the book of Revelation of the last days. Now, listen to this. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. See, something like a huge mountain, all ablaze. You know, something like a huge mountain. You know, something like a huge. You know, John saw a vision of something like a huge mountain. Maybe it was an asteroid that looks like a mountain. Oh, and the blood. Listen, when the volcanoes start releasing some gas, it takes something to break the waters, and all of a sudden, these rusty particles come out the sea and makes it look like blood. Eh? From a scientific view, okay? Now, maybe you'll get more when I show you these templates. I don't want to make this video long, but I just needed to show you this, okay? The asteroid could hit Earth and spark global winter as year of impact pinpointed. What? You imagine volcanoes, asteroids, will make a sheet, a blanket, darkness, like the 10 plagues. Yeah? 14,000 tremors in Santorini. What is going on here? Please. I need to show you this part before I show you the plagues. Look at this. Just hear the woman.
So explain like it's very...
Look at this. Egyptologist links Santorini quakes to biblical Exodus.
Very weird when you think about the parallels. We've been told, research has shown that the original volcano kind of equates to the timeline of ancient Egypt and the Exodus. We know it was, I can't remember, 1600 BC.
1600, 1550, something like that.
So how does this compare?
Exactly.
It's so crazy
first of
to
all,
think
we
about.
have an amazing discovery already many years that the volcano, the eruption of the volcano of Santorini back then in 1600, BC was connected to the story of Exodus.
All right, returning to Greece, where the island of Santorini is right now under a state of emergency after a series of earthquakes that started January 31st.
So, linking it to the biblical Exodus. Listen, this is the video edited that came out to me in 2017 when I shouted, remember the story, yes? This is the edited video. Now, what I realized is that half of it, God let me saw it, or see it, and the other half is edited. Remember that takes you to the real Mount Sinai in Arabia? Remember this part, yes? Well, I was always thinking, wow, God wanted me to really see the real mountain, or else I'll never be here. So it means that maybe the biblical plagues are true from this video. So I'm going to share it with you. And tell me what you think. The Santorini. The cause of the 10 plagues of Egypt. Now, this is Simcha Jakubowicz, okay? Please. Let's watch. Hear him well, okay?
Yachmos Stela, the Beni Hassan tomb paintings, Joseph's royal seal, and the Israelite slavery inscriptions all point to approximately 1500 BC as the date for Moses and the Exodus. If our date is correct, then there's something else that we have to factor in. Around 1500 BCE, people living along the Mediterranean experienced one of the most cataclysmic events in history, the eruption of the Santorini volcano in modern Greece. This eruption may be another crucial clue for decoding the biblical Exodus. This is the island of Santorini, 700 kilometers from the Egyptian coast.
Or that is the mouth. Yeah.
Coast across the Mediterranean. It is literally the mouth of a volcano.
Huge.
Some 3,500 years ago,
Uh.
Santorini was destroyed by one of the worst volcanic eruptions in human history. When it erupted, the volcano essentially brought to an end the Minoan civilization that once flourished here. It sent an ash cloud that measured some 40 kilometers straight up and 200 kilometers across. The sound of the eruption circled the Earth some 10 to 12 times.
To put this in perspective, an eruption like Santorini would be hundreds to thousands of times stronger, more explosive than the atom bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima.
Oh boy, we will feel it if something like that happens now.
Energy of that eruption was so immense, you would have had these huge explosions that were happening, and you'd hear crack, crack, crack. For hundreds of kilometers, people around were listening to it. We were getting earthquakes, probably magnitude 3, 4, maybe even 5 or higher, that were happening extremely rapidly. And it would have been, I'm sure, to the people living there as if the world was coming to an end.
Yeah. Please. Listen now.
So perhaps the cataclysmic events described in the Bible, such as plagues, darkness, and the parting of a sea, are somehow connected to the Santorini eruption. But like all things related to the Exodus, dating the Santorini eruption to 1500 BCE can be controversial.
People have been arguing about the dates of Santorini. Volcanologists and geologists would date the eruption in the 1600s BC. Archaeologists tend to date it in the 1500s BC.
Everybody just remember this. Mankind will always try and twist everything because they think they know it all. Okay?
Digging at Avaris, Professor Bitak has no doubt that he can pinpoint the Santorini eruption to the exact time period where we placed the Exodus.
Here, pumice from the Santorini eruption appears for the first time.
Look.
So from archaeological point of view, it looks very much as if the eruption happened early in the 18th dynasty, let us say around 1500 BC.
Yakubovich's chronology machine has now synchronized.
And this is James Cameron, director of Titanic, Avatar, many programs in National Geographic. You can see up here, it says, see, Titanic director James Cameron, floats Exodus evidence. Listen, this is the video when I shouted to God to if he exists, to show it to me. This is the edited video that came to me. It's not the original 1 hour and a half. This is a 2 hour edited. Remember, I showed you in my last videos that I made in this group. I only pressed it because of James Cameron. Boy, he knew that I was going to do that.
A pharaoh named Ahmose, the Hyksos expulsion, the Exodus, and the Santorini eruption. It appears that the Exodus code has finally been cracked. If Yakubovich is right, we can now explain the science underlying the biblical story. We can even explain what caused the greatest miracle of them all, the parting of the Red Sea. We can then trace the biblical map and discover the real Mount Sinai, where the Exodus story came to a climax, when Moses received the Ten Commandments.
See, this is where I get the edited version that, you know, takes you to Arabia, to the real mountain.
And placed them in the now lost Ark of the Covenant.
It's going to explain
the plagues,
the plagues.
biblical catastrophes that struck Egypt because Pharaoh wouldn't let the Israelite slaves go.
Look at this. With the Santorini volcano.
Until now, no one has come up with a comprehensive scientific explanation for all 10 plagues.
Look at this. Amazing.
The answer began to take shape for us after we returned to the Ahmose Stela and discovered an amazing synchronicity with the biblical text. The Bible says that the God of Israel passed judgment on the gods of Egypt. And the Stela confirms that the statues of the gods of Egypt were toppled to the ground.
In that stela.
Earthquakes are known to accompany volcanic eruptions like Santorini. It seems that the Stela and the Bible are describing the results of an earthquake, or more precisely, what scientists now call an earthquake storm.
Earthquake storms are sequences of large earthquakes that sweep across large areas. And the best examples are the Eastern Mediterranean, where we have long historical and archaeological records.
As it turns out, the biblical story takes place in an earthquake zone. The Nile Delta, where the Bible says the Exodus took place, is crisscrossed by fault lines. To the east, the Great Rift Fault separating the Asian and African plates runs through the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Red Sea.
Yeah, it's the crossing of the Dead Sea, of the Red Sea. See? Look at that fault line there. That was the cause of the water splitting. Don't know.
All the way to Africa. In addition, there is a fault line that runs along the modern Suez Canal and another fault line that runs along the Nile Delta under ancient Avaris. Meanwhile, some 700 kilometers to the west, the rift between the African plate and the European plate runs practically under Santorini.
I think they call this the Hellenistic Arc.
But what do earthquakes have to do with the biblical plagues?
Watch this.
Well, let's begin with the first plague. Earthquakes can't possibly explain how Moses turned the Nile's waters into blood.
Look at this.
Can they? In fact, they can, when they trigger gas leaks. And we don't have to go back 3,500 years to prove the point.
Watch this.
In 1984 at Lake Manoon, and in 1986 at Lake Nyos, both in Cameroon, the sweet, clear lake waters suddenly turned blood red.
See?
The mystery was solved when Professor George Kling explained the phenomenon in terms of an underground gas leak.
What was happening was that the bottom waters contained very high concentrations of iron, dissolved iron. And when that was mixed up to the surface, when the gas was released, it contacted oxygen and it formed an iron hydroxide, essentially rust, the same thing that happens on cars. And that rust was what caused the reddish, brownish color at the surface of the lake. When it comes to the biblical plagues along the Nile Delta there are many elements that are present that could suggest a buildup of gas. So we could have a situation where gas beneath the earth is trapped in pockets, and earthquakes along the fault line then release that gas. And depending on the kind of water that gas goes through, it could even turn that water red.
See?
If the Nile turned blood red as a result of a gas leak, then the chain of events described in the Bible would have been set into motion. The first thing that happens in such circumstances is that the water becomes devoid of oxygen and all living things in it die.
See what he just said there? Because of the particles, it looks like blood, yes? In the book of Revelation, see? Second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. See what I mean? So something like that could cause it. Because there are many earthquakes because of the volcanoes. And there are pockets of that gas waiting to be released. And at the same time, an asteroid hits. I'm just saying, you know, it's very similar. Gives us an explanation for those 7 trumpets.
The fish then begin to float in the polluted waters, rotting in the sun. The only things that do not die are frogs. Unlike fish, they can hop out. And as it turns out, biblical plague number 2 is a frog infestation.
See?
The lack of clean water then leads to lice, flies, and bacterial epidemics among humans and domestic animals. Not surprisingly, biblical plague number 3 is lice. Plague number 4 is flies. And plague number 5 is an epidemic.
Number 5. See? Exactly as the plague says.
Plague 6 is boils and blisters, man and beast. Can an earth...
See, boils. We have boils there again. And we go to the 7 trumpets. I don't know if it was the trumpets or the 7 vials. And huge boils started to come out the body of people. See, a third of the day was without light and also a third of the night. So, many of these are similar to those 10 plagues. Let me see if I can find it here. But I think that the bowls, or 7 bowls, one of the bowls is thrown into the Euphrates River and it's dried up. Something like that, you know. I'll check it out. Let's continue here with the 10 plagues and Santorini. It's so similar to what's coming in the book of Revelation in the last days.
Earthquake-induced gas leak explain this kind of outbreak? Let's go back to the 1986 disaster at Lake Nyos, Cameroon.
Look at this.
At the time, people living along the lake developed strange boils and burns. It turns out that carbon dioxide mixed with air put people into a kind of coma, reducing circulation to the skin and causing the kind of boils described in the Bible as plague number 6.
See what I mean?
Despite the first 6 plagues, the Bible records that Pharaoh still refused to let the Israelite slaves go. So Egypt was now struck by plague number 7, hail. And it was a very unusual hail, involving ice and fire mixed together. To this day,
See, ice and fire, we have it there again in the book of Revelation. See, the first angel sounded his trumpet and there came hail and fire mixed with blood.
Rabbis teach that the biblical description is no metaphor.
The 7th plague was the plague of hail, but the Bible describes hail in a very unique manner. The hail was together with ash, with fire. The idea being that the fire and the ice commingled together, they coexisted together.
Look at this.
The Bible then describes God as making a miracle within a miracle, taking opposites in nature and having them coexist together.
Incredibly, there is an Egyptian papyrus that tells the exact same story. It's called the Ipuwer Papyrus, and it's dated by many scholars to the Hyksos period. The Ipuwer papyrus specifically states that Egypt was struck by a strange hail, made up of ice and fire mingled together. Another piece of the puzzle has fallen into place. It now seems clear that the biblical and Egyptian texts are describing what scientists call accretionary lapilli, volcanic hail, that could only have come from the earthquake-induced Santorini volcano.
When the ash cloud goes up to great distances in the stratosphere, essentially what happens is you have moisture in the atmosphere. You also have a lot of water vapor in the cloud itself. So the small fragments of ash and crystals actually form a nucleus, something very similar to a hailstone.
In other words, Egypt experienced fire and ice raining from above, just as the Bible describes. It seems that earthquakes and the resulting volcanic and gas eruptions neatly explain the first 7 biblical plagues.
From the Santorini.
They also explain plague number 8, locusts. Locusts migrate in swarms. There can be between 40 and 80 million adult locusts in each square kilometer. Cold weather produces a drop in their body temperature and makes them land en masse. The volcanic hail and the weather disruptions caused by the Santorini eruption would have forced great clouds of locusts, which are common in this part of the world, to suddenly land in Egypt. As the hailstorm cleared and the temperature rose, so did the locusts, exactly as the biblical account describes. Gripped by earthquake storms and their consequences, Egyptians were now going to experience the last phase of the Santorini eruption, or what the Bible calls plague number 9, darkness.
All this from one volcano.
This is the way it probably worked. During the months before the eruption, seismic activity in the whole eastern Mediterranean was causing the African plate to grind under the European plate. Seawater was then turned to steam that bubbled up through the magma. This in turn caused pressure to build and erupt through weak points in the surface, triggering several small eruptions, leading to a major blowout. When the final eruption came, it created an ash cloud almost 40 kilometers from top to bottom and 200 kilometers across. When the ash cloud reached the Nile Delta, it engulfed the Egyptians in what the Bible calls a palpable darkness.
In a matter of a few minutes, they're plunged into a black world. Ash is falling around them. They can't see, they can't breathe very well. The sun has disappeared. You have black overhead, and they have no idea what's going on.
And that's why you have ash in Turkey, in Israel, in Egypt, to prove it.
The arrival of the ash cloud in Egypt and explains the biblical description of a prolonged darkness. Some might argue that since pumice can float, it could have been brought to Egypt by waves and washed ashore by tides. So we caught up with Professor Jean Daniel Stanley of the Smithsonian Institute. He's made the definitive discovery. He found Santorini ash in the Nile Delta. It could only have arrived in the ash cloud that plunged Egypt into the biblical darkness.
We had to look through 10 to 20,000 grains to find one ash grain. So we found a total of 40 ash grains. Not all ash looks the same. Ash has a fingerprint aspect. The ash particles that we find in the northern and northeastern Nile Delta are individual grains that came in from Santorini.
There's very little room for doubt that the Exodus account and the descriptions that we have in Egypt of this, the volcanic dust coming into Egypt, and geological description where we can actually see, feel, touch, and date the volcanic dust in the Nile, that they are describing the same tremendous volcanic event.
The final plague took place at midnight, after Moses ordered the Israelites to sit down to what became known as the first Passover meal. While the Israelites were involved in the Passover ritual, the Egyptians slept. And then it happened. Every firstborn male Egyptian died. Every house was affected. No one has ever been able to offer a plausible scientific explanation for the death of the firstborn. Until now. According to our scenario, at this point in the sequence of events that began some 6 months earlier, the gas leak that set the chain of plagues in motion would have finally erupted. Carbon dioxide would have seeped to the surface, and being heavier than air, would have killed animals and sleeping people before it dissipated harmlessly into the atmosphere. In case you think all this is conjecture, consider this. It happened in exactly the same way in 1986 at Lake Nyos, Cameroon.
Look at this.
On the fateful night of August 21st, the villagers at Nyos went to sleep. They couldn't have known that the carbon dioxide gas, which had turned the lake blood red, was now reaching a critical point. As the people of Lake Nyos slept, the top of the lake was keeping the carbon down like a cap on a pop bottle. But then, the earth rumbled and a landslide took place, sending rock into the water, disturbing the surface pressure and releasing the gas.
See what I mean? This is what I'm saying about the book of Revelation. It says about the water turning blood. See, maybe it comes because of volcanoes like Santorini. This asteroid is the one who's going to break that. That vapor is going to come out. I don't know. Very similar.
The surface, and like some alien monster emerged from the water. Droplets forming on it, turning the invisible gas into a visible fog. The fog then rolled across the water and across the land, suffocating everything in its path. And as suddenly as it appeared, it disappeared, dissolving harmlessly into the atmosphere. The next day, those who had been sleeping on higher ground woke up to find some 1,800 people dead. Hundreds of cattle and small animals also dead. All around,
see what I mean?
Deathly silence.
I was just sitting among the dead people. Inside the house, some of them were outside. Animals everywhere, lion, cows, dogs, everything. All the family, we were 56, but 53 died.
Look at this.
After the death of the firstborn, Pharaoh finally relented, letting Moses take his people out of Egypt. According to the Bible, what made Pharaoh give up was the selectivity of the death. The fact that it was only male firstborn who died. It was this selectivity that demonstrated to him that God himself was involved. How can we account for this? Well, Egyptian firstborn males had a privileged position. They were the heirs to the throne, to property, title, and more. They slept on Egyptian beds, low to the ground, while their brothers and sisters slept on rooftops, sheds, and in wagons. The Israelites sitting up at their first Passover meal did not feel a thing, while the low-traveling gas suffocated the privileged Egyptian males sleeping in their beds.
See what I mean? All this from the Santorini, and everything makes sense in a scientific perspective. Wow. What's the time? 35 minutes. I don't want to make it that long. I just had to show it in full. Let's play so you can get a picture. So this is what we have now. Listen, the Euphrates River drying up. Scientists say by 2040, the whole river will be dried up. See? And that will make a way for the kings from the north and from the east to attack Israel. See, all this is being formed for the final battle. And yet again, everybody is seeing what is going on this planet. And yet nobody believes that these stories are true. Even though all the archaeology is here. See? When those 10 plagues happened, this is where Moses landed in the real Mount Sinai, and God appeared here, made the 10 commandments, the Ark of the Covenant. And why all the extreme with the pharaohs and the 10 plagues? Because everything had to happen. Everything had, or else Jesus would never have come, never have died for the sins of the world. I know that many people don't believe these stories. How is it that we are here? Sorry, how you get a cell from inside your body and somebody designed that. That doesn't come. Your thoughts, your emotions, love. Where does it come from? And most of all, we come from evolution. We come from the monkey. How did all the other languages evolve? No, we would have all had one language, the monkey language, or no, but we get all the languages. See, the Bible said that it happened in the Tower of Babel, but then evolutionism gave you an answer about this, all this stuff. No, come on. It's something that we are not seeing in a bigger picture. But yet again, all these stories, just made up. Listen, I think that the Santorini is going to explode again. And many of the volcanoes, it talks about hills melting. Come on. See, in the time of Noah, there was a flood, water event for the destruction. In the end of days, it was going to be fire. So, listen, all this is for a new creation. A new creation. Too much evil in the world. So, just check. Everything that I'm showing you, you check it out. Look at this. Fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and the third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, a third of them turned dark. Look at this. Third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star. Star is like a planet. So, what did John really see? Maybe he saw a nuclear bomb missile that looks like a star, no? All lighted up. Why? Because look at this. A great star blazing like a torch. See, like he saw like a mountain, could be an asteroid. He saw like a great star, but actually a star is bigger than the Earth. It cannot be a star. Blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that have become bitter. Oh, wormwood. They say it's not, but I've been discovering, and actually it is. See, wormwood is an Ukrainian name for Chernobyl. The other day we saw Chernobyl being attacked. Why? Chernobyl is a common Artemisia. See, means black weed, and is a member of the wormwood family. Chernobyl, nuclear plant. What is going on? All this is just a fairy tale. And what if actually God chose these people to write this book to warn us, tell us how we should go in life, loving each other, helping each other, this, that, no killing, no stealing. He could have wrote 100 commandments, just 10 common sense ones. See? And then he wrote stuff so we can check it out and be vigilant, as he said. Be sober, be vigilant. Yeah. So I'll leave it here. Remember, you don't have to believe me. But about that blood water is just in Santorini. Look at this in Argentina.
Take a look at this positively biblical
See?
site, a river that's turned blood red. But it's not the Nile River in Egypt. It's a suburban Buenos Aires, and nobody is entirely sure why it's suddenly.
Many of them are red dye trucks that fell into the river, and listen, many people are doing videos. The blood waters. I think it's gonna happen like the 10 plagues because of Santorini volcano, what's the Yellowstone volcanoes, receiving lots of earthquakes. I don't know if those other ones are gonna use for judgment for the earth, but if you see what's going around with Palestine, Israel, Russia, they're just thinking of war and destruction and this power. God's gonna come and remove them all. So I'll leave you all. See you in the next one, okay? Just wanted to show you, just to get it. You check it out, and you know, you can see at the back here, those are live feed cameras from Santorini. Some smoke there. See that? That smoke coming out. This is live feeds right now. So I'm just saying. So bye-bye now.